Hey, what's going on there, guys? I'm back here today with another deck type for you. So today we are taking a look at a modern deck, and it is Blue, White, Red Control. Now, it has a lot of different names: America Control, USA Control, whatever you guys want to call it. It is blue, white, red colored, and basically this deck is going to just try to make it so that anything your opponent is doing is really insignificant, or they're just not doing anything at all. We're just restricting them from making their deck work and having them win the game. So before we get things started, before we take a look at this deck, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs, and be sure to check out the playlists in the description below where I have the previous decks that I've covered on the channel, including a playlist to all the modern decks that I've covered, and also a playlist to all the budget decks that I've covered on the channel. So if you guys are playing on a budget, you don't want to spend a ton of money on Magic or anything like that, you can check that out and you can watch some of those videos. But we are starting off here with our creatures. So the first one is Snapcaster Mage. He's a 2/1 for 2 with Flash, and we're running 3 of them here. Whenever he enters the battlefield, target instant or sorcery card in our grave is going to gain flashback until the end of the turn, which is going to allow us to play a lot of different spells. Once we use one of our spells, we get it into our grave, we can use Snapcaster Mage to get some more value out of it, whether it's using something like Path to exile one of our opponent's creatures so that they're not swinging in with it, or they don't have it on the battlefield for one of its effects. Or we can just go for stuff like Mana Leak. We can counter other spells, Cryptic Command for a variety of its different abilities that it has. There are just a lot of possibilities with Snapcaster Mage, and he makes a lot of the things that we have in this deck really, really good. Then we have Vendilion Clique, so that's the only other creature that we have in here, and I have 2 of them. So Vendilion Clique is a 3/1 for 3 with Flash and Flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield, we are going to look at our opponent's hand. We can choose a non-land card from it. If we do, they reveal it, put it onto the bottom of their library, and then they get to draw a card. So it's a form of letting us see what our opponent has. We can take something that could be a crucial piece to their deck, especially if it's something like a combo deck or anything like that, and we can just make them put that onto the bottom of their library and have them draw a card. Like, sure, they draw a card, but at the same time, getting rid of something that our opponent may have that is going to potentially stop us from doing what we're doing, or could get them closer to winning the game, is something that we want to do. We want to get that out of their hand, and we don't want to worry about that. So Vendilion Clique is awesome for that. It also swings in with flying and deals some damage on its own. Now we're getting into the rest of the things that we have. So we have our Path to Exile here as a playset. Instant speed, 1 white mana, and we get to exile target creature. And the only downside to it is that its controller gets to search his or her library for a basic land, and they get to put it on the battlefield tapped, and then they shuffle their library. So that's the only downside to it. But Path to Exile is really awesome. It just hits a lot of different creatures, and it assures us that whatever creature our opponent has isn't going to stick around, and we don't have to worry about any graveyard interactions if they have means of getting a creature from their graveyard back into the battlefield. We also have 3 lightning bolts, so pretty straightforward. Instant speed for 1 red, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. It's versatile, it either lets us deal damage to a creature or our player, and it just basically comes down to what matchup we're playing and what creatures our opponent has on the board, and whether we want to keep that lightning bolt for another creature, or if we are just going to be aiming it towards their head and we're just going to be dealing that damage to them. We also have 3 Lightning Helix, so pretty much on the same kind of grounds as Lightning Bolt. It costs 1 more white, and it's an instant speed card. It deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and then we gain 3 life, so it's a nice means of, again, dealing damage to either creatures or players, but we gain back some life. It's a little bit more costly, but at the same time, gaining back that 3 life could mean putting us at an advantage up against some aggro decks as well. So the Lightning Helix is nice for that. We have 2 Electrolyze, so instant speed, 3 cost, and it's going to deal 2 damage divided as we choose amongst any number of target creatures and or players, and we get to draw cards. So between 2 creatures, 2 players, or however we want to mix that up, the Electrolyze is going to deal the damage, and being able to draw off of it is also fairly nice as well. So being able to have itself be replaced in our hand is going to be really convenient. We have a playset of Mana Leak. So Mana Leak is a 2-drop counter at a instant speed. Counters target spell unless its controller pays 3, making it pretty nice. There are some matchups where Mana Leak kind of isn't as amazing, but still having it in the main board, it counters a lot of things and it's pretty concrete. There are 2 Think Twice in the build as well. Instant speed 2 cost, draw a card and flashback for 3. It just ends up being really nice in the early game. We can go turn 2 if nothing else. Think twice, we draw a card, and then the following turn we can flash it back if we hit another land drop, which with the amount of lands that we have in our deck, and this being a control deck, that's going to happen. So Think Twice is just nice for being able to cycle through, draw some cards, and get ourselves closer to the other things that we actually want to be hitting. We also have a Singleton Timely Reinforcements in the build, so it's a sorcery for 3, and if we have less life than our opponent, we gain 6 life. If we have fewer creatures than an opponent, we put 3 1/1s onto the battlefield. So Timely Reinforcements is ultimately just kind of nice and conditional up against like those aggro builds where they're just trying to outrace us, they're trying to get us to 0 as quick as possible with either creatures or spells or anything like that. And Timely Reinforcements can just push us back into the game and keep us from getting into that dangerous red zone in terms of life total. We also have 3 Cryptic Command. So Cryptic Command is awesome. It's an instant speed for 4. It does have triple blue, but we get to choose 2 of the abilities, and amongst them we can counter a target spell, we can return target permanent to its owner's hand, we can tap all creatures that our opponents control, or we can draw a card. So ultimately, it's again conditional. Most times I'm going to be countering and drawing a card, or tapping all my opponent's creatures and drawing a card. Those seem to be like the 2 biggest things that I'm doing, but it's versatile. It just has a lot of different things that can be used for different situations. I also have 2 Supreme Verdicts, so sorcery speed and 4 cost. Can't be countered and destroys all creatures. Basically just up against those aggro builds. You just want to have wraths and just clear the board and not have to worry about things sticking around or your opponent having a huge battlefield full of creatures. And then we're kind of getting to the win condition or pseudo win condition portion of the deck. So these cards are more or less things that I use to win the games more often than any other means, like swinging in with Vendilion Clique a million times or anything like that. So the first one is Batterskull. Batterskull is really awesome. It's a 5 cost in equipment artifact. It equips for 5, and we can bounce it back to our hand for 3. And whenever it comes out, it's going to make a 0/0 germ creature token, and then the Batterskull is going to be equipped to it. So the equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has Vigilance and Lifelink. And it's really awesome just having a 4/4 creature with Vigilance and Lifelink on the board for 5. If we're able to throw it on a creature like Vendilion Clique, that's pretty much the only other means we can have like a flying creature other than Celestial Colonnade, which that really is out of the question. But Batterskull ends up being really nice. If we can throw it on Clique, it's really convenient for us, and it gets a lot of damage through. But just having that ground 4/4 creature that gains us back life and has Vigilance is pretty good. We can also bounce back the Batterskull for 3, making it pretty hard for our opponents to get rid of it if they're trying to use some targeted artifact hate for it. So it's nice. It lets us gain back some life, and it also makes a creature or makes one of our creatures a little bit bigger. I have 1 White Sun Zenith, so instant speed and X amount of mana and triple white. Put X amount of 2/2s onto the battlefield, and then we shuffle White Suns back into our library. So it just makes a huge amount of 2/2 cat tokens, and basically this is for the really late game where we can just flood the board with 2/2s at the end of our opponent's turn, and then we can just swing in with them the following turn. So White Suns ends up just allowing us to flood the board. And then we have our Planeswalkers. So I have 2 Ajani Vengeant. Ajani Vengeant is 4 cost, 3 loyalty, +1, lets us have target permanent not untapped during its owner's next untap step, which is kind of convenient for man lands or any stuff like that. If our opponent has some select creature that we want not untapping, it's pretty nice for that. His -2 lets us deal 3 damage to target creature or player, and we gain 3 life. So it's like a expensive Lightning Helix at 4 mana if we want to just use it for that whenever he comes out. And the -7 destroys all lands target player controls, so it's just a huge means of just blowing out our opponent and not letting them have any lands, and just pretty much not letting them do anything. If they don't have lands, chances are they're not going to be able to do anything whatsoever. And then we have one Gideon Jura. So Gideon Jura is the last card and the last Planeswalker we have here. 6 loyalty, 5 cost, one of my favorite Planeswalkers. +2, and during target opponent's next turn, creatures that player controls attack Gideon if able. -2 destroys target tapped creature, and his 0 ability turns him into a 6/6 Planeswalker, and a 6/6 creature Planeswalker, and prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn, making him a pretty easy way to be able to swing in and just bash your opponent's face with a 6/6 creature. So that is the main board that we have. Now let's switch over and take a look at the land base, because I had the board all filled here with the cards that I had going on and a lot of singletons and stuff. Let's take a look at what our land base looks like. For our land base here, we have 26 lands. The first set of lands are the fetches, and we have 7 of them. We have 4 Scalding Tarns, which is going to allow us to search for a island or mountain whenever we crack it. So we can search for our Shocklands, or we can search for a island, just a basic island off of Scalding Tarn. Then we have 3 Arid Mesa, so we can crack it and search for a mountain or plains, and that is going to, again, allow us to search for our Shocklands that we have, or the 1 singleton plains that we have in the build. For our Shocklands, I have 3 Steam Vents, 2 Hallowed Fountains, and 1 singleton Sacred Foundry. And then we have a 3-of for Celestial Colonnade. Celestial Colonnade is just really awesome. It's a really awesome man land. Enters in tapped, but for 5 mana, it becomes a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token with flying and vigilance. It's still a land, making it just ridiculously awesome. It's another really easy way to have a creature and just bash our opponent with it. Then we have our other duels. So we have 2 Sulfur Falls and 1 Glacial Fortress. 1 Mystic Gate for our filtering. It's the only filter land that I have here, and it's mainly for the triple blue for Cryptic Command, and also the triple white for White Suns. I wanted to have Mystic Gate to kind of just help a little bit with that. A lot of times I won't actually even see it, but there are some situations, and I have play tested it in certain games where the Mystic Gate has helped out with getting the triple color of either blue or white that I needed. I have 3 Ghost Quarters, so the Ghost Quarter is pretty much strictly for Tron. It also helps us out against Valakut as well. Not really as impressive up against like Valakut and Scapeshift, but Ghost Quarter is mainly for the man lands and for Tron, just not allowing Tron to go turn 3 or turn 4 and go off and just get big things on the board already. So Ghost Quarter is going to hinder anything they try to do really, really early on, and that was the rationale between Ghost Quarter over Tectonic Edge, which I was playing. And then we have our basics. So I just have 2 basic islands and 1 basic plains. So 26 lands, that's a land base. Now let's jump over again and take a look at what our sideboard for this deck looks like. So for our sideboard here, the first card that we have is Sowing Salt, and it is a 3-of. Sowing Salt is mainly for the Scapeshift and the lands matchups like Tron. So with Scapeshift, we want to be getting rid of Valakut so that our opponent can't go off with Valakut and just deal like endless numbers of 3 damage every time they have mountains entering in. Sowing Salt is going to assure us that we just get rid of that Valakut and we don't have to worry about it. Up against Tron, we just get rid of their pieces so that they can't go and ramp into just ridiculous Eldrazi stuff. So Sowing Salt is awesome for that. We can also sight it in up against decks that have man lands. If they're like really heavy on man lands and they really rely on them, we can go for Sowing Salt and just get rid of that. But 99% of the time it's just going to be up against the lands matchup, Scapeshift and Tron. I have 2 Tormod's Crypt for the graveyard based matchups, anything like Loam, Gifts, Dredge, any of those kind of variant decks where they're relying off of their graveyard and interacting with their graveyard. I want to have Crypt to just get rid of any interactions they may have. I have one Luminarch Ascension for the really slow matchups where not a whole lot's going on in the early game. It's an enchantment for 2, and at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if we didn't lose any life, we put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. And if we have 4 or more quest counters on Luminarch Ascension, we can pay 2 mana and put a 4/4 angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield, and we can use that ability as many times as we want. So Luminarch Ascension just ends up being this ridiculous way of putting 4/4s onto the battlefield for a cheap amount of mana once our opponent has let us build up the counters on it. If they aren't doing anything early game, it just ends up being awesome for that. So any of the slower matchups, I like siding that in. I have 2 Wrath of God, so with Wrath of God, it is going to destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated, and it's 4 mana, so it's just another board wipe for us. Rather than Supreme Verdict with it not being able to be countered, here we have where creatures can't be regenerated, so if they have any regenerate abilities like Thrun or anything like that, we can deal with creature-heavy decks, anything like that. Also Pod as well. We can get rid of it, their creatures, just because Pod is generally a pretty creature-heavy build and deck style as well. We have 1 Stony Silence, so this is up against the Affinity and also the Birthing Pod matchup. So Stony Silence is not going to allow activated abilities of artifacts to be activated, and it's just going to sit on the board there as a 2-drop enchantment. Now, decks like Pod do have the ability to run Abrupt Decay, and a lot of them have been doing that lately, so I still like to have Revoke Existence in the sideboard as well, so I have that as a 2 of. Revoke Existence is going to allow us to exile target artifact or enchantment for 2 mana. It's especially nice up against Affinity, where we can just get rid of Arcbound Ravager and other things. We don't have to worry about our opponent being able to regenerate in the Affinity matchup if they have the means of regenerating. So stuff that would say like destroy target artifact, if they have the means of getting around that by regenerating, we're kind of out of luck. So Revoke Existence is nice for that. But it deals with like Splinter Twin, it deals with Birthing Pod, it deals with Affinity. So those are kind of the big things that I like it for. So Revoke is nice for that. I have Spellskite in here. So Spellskite is for the Infect matchups and also the Hexproof matchups as well. So like the Boggle decks. Spellskite can just allow us to redirect the target of target spell or ability to Spellskite for 1 Phyrexian blue mana. So we can either pay with 2 life or with blue mana. It really just depends on what we have at the moment and whenever we're casting Spellskite. But being able to deal with Infect and being able to deal with Hexproof is kind of a nice thing with Spellskite. So I like to have it for that. And then we have Leyline of Sanctity. So that is our last card here. If we begin the game Leyline of Sanctity is in our opening hand, we can start off the game with it on the battlefield, and we can't be the targets of spells or abilities that our opponents control. So I like setting in Leyline up against red deck wins. I also like setting it in up against Scapeshift, because Valakut is going to do nothing. They're going to have to use it on our creatures, and that's not what they want to be doing. They want to be targeting us with their Valakut. So Leyline is nice for that, and anything that has an excessive use of target player effects and abilities. So we want to have Leyline for that as well. But being able to start off the game with it on the battlefield is pretty nice for us. So that is the main board and sideboard that we have here for blue, white, red control for Modern. If you guys enjoyed this deck tech, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Like I mentioned before, there are playlists in the description where you guys can check out more deck tech videos on the channel. And the entire deck list is in the description below, where you guys can use it as a reference. Until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.